Will Stein is going to Kentucky, and Tosh Lupoi probably going to Cal.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Benson McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. I've got individual standouts because we're talking more about Washington. Why? Because that game was awesome. Ducks versus them showed us just how awesome indeed. Thoughts on that? The Oregon receiver room. Trivia is back on a Tuesday. I mean, just a bunch of stuff to get to. The show brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, if you missed yesterday's live show, or even listened to the show if you're a podcast person, I appreciate all of you out there. I've shared my thoughts on Will Stein. Let's move to the other coordinator that Oregon's probably going to lose. So, the Ducks are going to go from having among the most coordinator continuity in all of college football to, in all likelihood, needing to replace both their offensive and defensive coordinators going into 2026. Now, Will Stein to Kentucky has been announced. Tosh Lupoi to Cal has not, as I'm recording this show. I have full expectation that's going to be the case. There would have to be a dramatic late in the process shift from someone or many someones to make that not the case. So, given that that's where we're at, let's talk about where Oregon goes in that direction. This is much simpler, in theory, than the offensive coordinator search. Because as I talked about in yesterday's show, last night's show really, which I recorded, of course, 20 minutes ago as I'm recording this show. Anyway, time's a social construct. Who cares? But I think that's more complicated, and there should be a bigger search, and you don't have to just promote from within. On the defensive side, Chris Hampton is right there, and I'm 100% on board with making Chris Hampton the full-time defensive coordinator. He's been the co-DC for the last couple of seasons. He's garnered Power 4 interest before, so if you don't make him DC, you are probably going to lose him. I don't think that's as likely of a guarantee with some of Oregon's great offensive staffers, though it's always a possibility. Chris Hampton, though, could throw a wrinkle into that. And there's a possibility. I have not heard this. I'm going to try and find out more on this front in the coming days. But Tulane's job is open, where he was the defensive coordinator before, which is the biggest reason why I say he should be the DC if Tosh Lupoi goes to Cal. But if Chris Hampton leaves, well, suddenly you'd be out looking. But Chris Hampton has shown you that he is an elite recruiter, which is Tosh Lupoi's greatest strength. And he is obviously, Tosh that is, gotten much better at the defensive play calling component over the last couple of years. You have to credit Dan Lanning and the work that he's done with Coach Lupoi there, but you also have to credit Tosh and what he's done to make himself better, because the defensive results are just undeniable. And this year's defense, despite losing a bunch of guys from last year, has been a better unit. Even though I still lean just barely towards last year's defensive line, man, this one is really good. And everything they've done to build that unit, and the other ones as well, but particularly the defensive line, it has been phenomenal. So I understand why Cal would want to hire Tosh Lupoi. He's an alum. He didn't leave on great terms, but that was like 14 years ago or so, which is like half my lifespan. That's crazy. Anyway, not going to think about that. If he winds up being the head coach there, I want Hampton. He was the defense coordinator at Tulane. I don't think you can keep him as the co-DC. It'd be really cool if you could. I don't think you can, because his resume is one that's going to get him a major DC job. And I think he's eminently qualified. He's, of course, been there, knows all the guys. You think about roster retention, I think that factors into it as well. Hampton would be the logical hire there. Far more than anybody on the offensive staff would be an automatic OC hire for me. Now, if, this is an if, Chris Hampton were to say, get a head coaching job, that's really possible, because I think he will be one day. I think he wants to be one day. There are three names that immediately popped into my head. One of them is who Oregon just played on Saturday. I would 100% try and poach Ryan Walters from Washington. I don't think that he has any major loyalty to the Huskies. He was the head coach at Purdue. It didn't go well. He was at Illinois before that. So he's bounced around a bit. Maybe wants to be a head coach again. And Dan Lanning's track record of turning coordinators into head coaches in this hypothetical scenario would be 4 for 4 if you count Chris Hampton, and I absolutely would. So you compare that to what Washington has done, turning coordinators into head coaches under Jedd Fisch. I don't think it's actually happened yet. So, yeah, I'm 100% on board with that move. Because Ryan Walters had a good game on Saturday. Will Stein was better, but Ryan Walters was darn good. I would be down for that across the board. Would it be possible? I don't know. Make the rivalry game even spicier, but I think Ryan Walters is a really good defensive coordinator. He's done it now at 2 different stops and had a lot of success as a DC. Would it be a long-term play? No, because he'd probably want to he might, maybe he doesn't, want to be a head coach again someday, but his name absolutely popped into my head if both Tosh and Hampton were to leave. Another name, and you probably don't know this one, but if you go look at the defensive stats for San Diego State, you'll understand why Rob Auric is a guy that I would want Dan Lanning to consider. Now, I'm very much in the camp, like I'm expressing my desires here. I am very much in the camp in Dan Lanning we trust because his track record of making elite hires across the board has been reflected in every area of the program. The recruiting, the retention, the development, the results. They've all been there. So if it's none of these guys, I don't think that's automatically a bad thing. It's not like they would have, in my view, gone out and whiffed. These are just the names that come into my head. Auric's defense this year at San Diego State, they have rebuilt that program. He and Sean Lewis, the head coach, who's also a candidate to be the head coach at Cal, but he's got a track record, obviously the last couple seasons, in the state of California, which Oregon recruits very heavily. I think Oregon kind of recruits itself, but I haven't done a deep dive into his recruiting metrics there. It's kind of hard to judge when you'd be coming from the Group 5 level, making that big of a jump up in competition. But I think any Oregon defense coordinator is going to be able to recruit, especially with the number of guys in the last class and in this upcoming NFL draft that they're going to put into the league. So, third name that popped into my head, Brian Ward, the defensive coordinator at Arizona State. Now, I don't think Kenny Dillingham would be thrilled if Dan Lanning called him up and said, "Hey, Kenny, how you doing? Love seeing you have this success, man. You're doing an awesome job. Hey, can I talk to Brian real quick? Because they like him down there in Tempe, and they should." He was on Jake Dickert's staff as the defensive coordinator previously, went down to ASU last year of the Pac-12, RIP, and he's been really good. Really, really good. So those are guys who, from a schematic standpoint, I have watched their teams play extensively over the last season or two, and I feel like that would be a good match for Oregon. Like hiring any of those guys, I'd say thumbs up. Those are names that just pop into my. I'm sure Dan Lanning's got he might have a completely different list of coaches. Maybe there's some crossover there. Those are just the guys that I'd want to go and hire. But the back and forth that I keep having is, man, I'm stoked about the caliber of coach that Oregon's going to be able to attract because these guys are leaving or potentially leaving. And on the other hand, man, who's going with them? What players are going with? And Oregon hasn't had to deal with this a lot, and now it's like drinking out of a fire hose compared to the last couple of cycles. The coaching continuity has not been normal. Well, the chickens have come home to roost, and if Tosh Lupoi does become the next head coach for the Cal Bears, then it's going to be a full court press for Dan Lanning. But again, the thought, even before that, frankly, of which guys would go with Tosh Lupoi, if anybody, would he be able to pull some starters? Don't know. Does he stay for the playoff run? It seems if Will's doing that, I'd like to think Tosh would do it as well. That would not be as bad because Hampton is sitting right there, unless he becomes a head coach in the next couple of weeks. So Stein is confirmed to be staying through the playoff run as Oregon's play caller. If Tosh were to leave to go get on the ground and start building everything the way he wants at Cal down there in Berkeley, and probably talk to Jaren Kiave-Sangapolotele at some point. If he wants to start doing that, I'd say that's a bummer, but I would not be nearly as concerned as I would have been had Will Stein left. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. And let's go back through the Washington game again. Ducks versus them rocks, and so did these guys. First, this episode brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift. And Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are crazy big. The quality with Omaha Steaks is what you will appreciate first because they've got incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and the meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking easier. I'm all about meal prep, all about convenience. I'm insanely busy this time of year because sometimes I'm going to call an SU game and then Will Stein gets hired to be Kentucky's head coach, and that makes my Monday night a lot busier than it needed to be. But that's what we're here for, of course, this time of year. All of the news. And Omaha Steaks is here with unforgettable gifts. OmahaSteaks.com. Go there, get 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's OmahaSteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. Check them out at OmahaSteaks.com. All right, got my second segment sipping. I've had people comment before when the show is airing at 3 a.m. Pacific time. Man, Spencer's out here grinding at 3 a.m. to give us a show. And I'm like, guys, I love you guys out there. I love doing this show. I am not awake at 3 in the morning every day to do the show live. However, I am recording this show much closer to 3 a.m. Pacific than I would really care for. But that's where we're at, and it's grind season. You either embrace the hustle or you run away from it. I am in the first camp. I'm very much in the first camp. So appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network out there. Let's talk more about that Washington game. Man, Ducks versus them. Was not expecting. I got to be honest. I was not expecting the direction that they went. The theme of it was love over hate, even though it's a rivalry game. And then at the end, of course, Dan Lanning, it's dubs down. It is dubs down. I think that was my favorite moment, was to see him lean into that. But the early reaction I had and thought when, that was the message and they were helping make meals for people in the community, it felt very Ted Lasso. Very Ted Lasso, and I absolutely loved it. And the other great moment, if you haven't seen it, I don't know what you're waiting for. It's incredible, as always. The coaching staff going crazy. They think Malik Benson on the 64-yard touchdown. I think Lanning, in particular, thought he was getting tackled because he was saying on the ball, right? He, off the chunk, explosive play, wanted to get up and catch Washington off guard, and then all of a sudden, he hurdles through the two guys. The Washington players crash into each other, not touching him. He goes full Tracktown USA on him, and then everybody goes insane. It was so great. So unbelievably great. And Malik Benson's November is the stuff of legends. The Iowa catch to set up the game-winning field goal on the road, the USC punt return, and the Washington touchdown. I mean, give me a better month for a receiver that Oregon has had in recent memory. I don't know. Just from a clutch standpoint, I don't think it gets more clutch than Malik Benson right now. More thoughts on receivers coming later on the show. But my individual standout segment can only do this after games. Less than 15 times a year, I can do this segment. It's one of my favorites. Where I go a little beyond the stats and say, hey, Malik Benson had a big day, of course. The first 100-yard receiver in a game for the Ducks this year. Hey, Dante Moore was great. But who made it happen and didn't necessarily get all the love? Let me start with Dillon Thieneman. Damon Williams had 10 carries for 27 yards. And in the recap, you saw Dan Lanning and heard him talk about the importance of containing the quarterback run. Dillon Thieneman was the biggest reason that was effective. Damon Williams had 2 runs, I think, of over 5 yards. One of them was on a scramble, and one was on an RPO when he got around Jaden Kennedy. Dillon Thieneman keeps playing better and better. He has been everything that we hoped he would be when he came over from Purdue in the offseason. He has been so steady, so consistent, game-clinching interception there at the end. And I want to shout out Jaden Kennedy as well. But Dillon Thieneman's ability to play at all 3 levels, the only thing we haven't seen him do this year is sack the quarterback and be that kind of blitzer. Guess what? Don't need him to be. Not what I was looking for in the offseason when he came over. I thought, man, be nice to have a rangy safety on the back end. He's that guy. And he does everything. And the way they're using him in that Caleb Downs role where he's kind of a spot, it's like a soccer formation almost. It's like the defense, instead of 4-2-5, which is their base personnel, I guess you could see it as 3-3-5 as well because they count Mateo as a linebacker, whatever. They really line up as 4-2-1-2. 2 or 4, it's 4-2-1-4 basically. He's below the DBs in some of these alignments, and he's behind the linebackers. And he just goes and makes plays. Game-sealing interception at Penn State. Game-sealing interception against Washington. And his quarterback spy ability. He had a sack in this game as well when Mateo missed. Thieneman came down, chased Damon Williams to the sideline, dropped him for a 3-yard loss. Not a lot of guys can make that play. He's special. He's just playing really good ball. Jaden Kennedy, man. Your audio didn't cut out. I'm just thinking of how to say another uniquely good thing about Jaden Kennedy. He's just a certified dude back there. And his interception, you got to shout out Jerry Mixon as well, who was running stride for stride with their best NFL receiver, Denzel Boston. Tough look. Again, man, just a tough day for the Oregon doesn't develop crowd in Seattle because their future NFL wideout couldn't get by Oregon's 3-star linebacker. Just tough. That storyline has always been ridiculous, and it just came to a head in a beautiful way on Saturday. Anyway, so Jaden Kennedy, the pass breakup he had when it looked like he was beat, the interception in the end zone, he's just all over the place. I think he's the best cover guy that Oregon's had at the nickel spot. I thought Brandon Johnson was good last year. He was. Brandon Johnson did a good job. Jaden Kennedy's significantly better. And he's having his best season as a college player by far. Again, those 2 guys, they have plugged some holes, and they have been phenomenal all season long. And Saturday, they played really well. Tatum Tuioti, I think at the end of the year, we'll look back and say Tatum Tuioti was Oregon's best defensive lineman. That might be borne out by statistics, by PFF grades, and eye test. I think it's all trending in that direction. Brandon Finney had a bounce-back game. Worst performance of his career as a true freshman last week against USC. The pass breakup in the end zone on Desmond Roebuck. The 4th down stop against Denzel Boston. And just nowhere for Damon Williams to go with the ball down the field. It's because Finney was locking dudes up. Denzel Boston is a really good receiver, and he was nowhere to be found other than the 2 touchdowns. He had 24, 25 receiving yards. Man, Finney was great. Mateo continues to play really well, but holy smokes, he's got to finish sacks. He is so close all the time, but he is just not making the play, and he's got to. He's just got to. A couple other guys on the defensive line. Ashton Porter and Terrence Green. Last couple of weeks, and I said this with these 2 guys about the Iowa game as well. They have been so quietly impactful and important to the defensive front. The depth that Oregon has up there is great. Those two guys, a big reason why. And they were showing up when I went back to watch the game again on Saturday. Awesome games from both of those dudes. Jamari Johnson, this is also a storyline that showed up in a big way, and the way that he has emerged as a pass catcher, as the receiving room has dealt with a clown car of injuries, has been massive. Will Stein is so comfortable going 12 personnel in obvious passing downs. Why? Because Kenyon Sadiq is a unicorn and Jamari Johnson is no slouch. And Washington could not cover him on Saturday. Was really fun to watch. And then last one that I've got, Dier Hill. Did not have a huge game statistically. None of Oregon's running backs did. But in a game where, as I have said previously, Washington's defense played well. They did a lot of things very well schematically. Dier Hill quietly was averaging 5.5 yards per touch on 8 touches. It's not the most explosive game he had, but there were a couple of moments, and then his longest run of the day was called back because of a phantom holding call. And I thought Dier Hill, frankly, was Oregon's best back consistently throughout the day. And I was a little surprised he didn't get it more, but I'm not opposed because Will Stein knows what he's doing back there. Hard to argue with the results. But yeah, Dier Hill quietly, when he got the ball, was effective and gave Oregon just kind of small sparks when the run game wasn't where it's usually been. So those are my standouts from the Washington game. Love that. And SSA and those wide receivers, I can't say enough good things about them. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch. Finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. Puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. Wherever Oregon's playoff game winds up being played, Autzen Stadium, or if they have another game or 2 or 3, Game Time's going to be the place you want to go to get tickets to see the Ducks play in person, because the process is great. You're going to save money compared to other ticketing services. Trust me, I've used it several times before. You want to use Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, Game Time. All right, let's start this third segment with an SSA. Oregon remains an annual CFP contender without Tosh and Will. 9.5. In Dan Lanning, we trust. Ultimately, it comes back to the head coach. If you believe Dan Lanning's the right guy, the only reason I don't make this a 10 is this will be the first time that he's got a new defensive coordinator, and having to hire a new OC at the same time, it will be, and again, that's if Tosh leaves, which might have happened by the time you're listening to or watching this show. But yeah, I trust Dan Lanning a lot. That's an easy 9.5. Let's talk about the wide receivers, and then we'll close with some trivia. So, got this from a Locked On Ducks insider. Here's an interesting question. How many wide receivers on this year's team would have been the number 2 on the 2022 team? So, Dan Lanning's first year at the helm. And I've talked about this before because it's been a really great thing to watch, and Junior Adams started it. Ross Douglas needs to continue it. The development of Oregon becoming an elite wide receiver recruiting program over the last several years has been substantial. Wide receivers and DBs, Oregon is recruiting and getting production out of those guys like they never have before. And I'd love if Dillon Thieneman came back. I don't know that he will, because that guy looks like he's ready for the NFL. And you got to credit Purdue. And by the way, going back to what I said at the start of this show, you know who got an under-recruited Dillon Thieneman to become a good player at the start? Ryan Walters, when he was at Purdue. Just throwing it out. Maybe that'd be an incentive for Thieneman to stay. That'd be worth it. Anyway, So in 2022, Oregon's leading receivers were Troy Franklin with 891 yards. Chase Cota was second with 497, and then Chris Hudson was third with 472. Now, Hudson's solid. Don't think Hudson would be on the depth chart in a major way for this team. Chase Cota, on the other hand, I was always a big Chase Cota fan. And really, when I've compared Jeremiah McLaughlin to Chase Cota before, that was actually my comp for him coming out of high school. He reminds me a lot of Chase Cota. And I'm a Chase Cota fan. He never made the catch like Jeremiah McLaughlin did on Saturday that was called incomplete, which is just, I'm so glad they put it on Ducks versus them because they're just reminding everybody, yeah, Big Ten officials and replay crew, you screwed this up and took away one of the greatest catches that any of us have ever seen. So, how many on this year's team would have been the number 2? Well, let's see. Malik Benson, yeah, I take him over Chase Cota. Again, I like Chase Cota. This is not a knock these guys sort of segment, but would Benson be the number 2? Yes. Would McLaughlin? Yes. Would DeCorian would be the number 1 on the 2022 team? And I love Troy Franklin, but yeah, no, he'd be the number 1. So Evan Stewart, yeah. Gary Bryant, that's where I'm not as sure. Gary's a good player. I don't know that there's a huge gap between Gary Bryant Jr. and Chase Cota. Both are just really solid, sneaky speed, can break out, possession receivers. You're not throwing contested balls to down the field a whole heck of a lot. So, they can be used in some gadget ways. Like Cota had that long screen pass against Stanford that year. Gary Bryant, we've seen make a lot of plays over the years. I think those guys are about the same, very interchangeable. So, my answer would be DeCorian would, McLaughlin would, Benson would, Evan Stewart would. So, 4. 4 would be the number 1 or 2 on that team. That's just where they've just grown. They've just grown a lot at that position. Dana White's burner sent this one in. Who in the AP top 12 on a neutral field do you think Oregon can beat without DeCorian and Gary Bryant? Well, when you've got Kenyon Sadiq and you've got Jamari Johnson and Malik Benson, yeah, I want Oregon to get healthy at wide receiver without question. But do I think that there are some teams where it'd make a difference? I don't know about a ton. Honestly, I got to pull up the AP poll. So in the top 12, how many? Let me read that question again. Who in the AP top 12 on a neutral field do you think Oregon can beat without DeCorian? Who can Oregon beat without DeCorian and Gary Bryant? Okay, doing some SEC hypotheticals here. Miami, yes. BYU, yes. Alabama, yes. Notre Dame, yes. Oklahoma, yes. Texas A&M, yes. Ole Miss, yes. Texas Tech, now we're getting to dicey territory. I'm bullish on Tech, man. They're good. Texas Tech is really good. Oregon's actually ahead of them in the AP poll. I don't agree with that, but we'll see what happens with the playoff rankings. Georgia, yes. Indiana, Ohio State, no. So everybody except Indiana and Ohio State. Doesn't mean Oregon would automatically win if they're not there and match up with one of those teams. I'm just saying that, do I think Oregon is capable? Yes. But you need to get at least one of them back if you're going to beat Indiana or Ohio State. And it's not so much about down-to-down production. I think it'll be more about situational football and being able to make a big play in a spot. And, of course, we've seen Evan Stewart take over against Ohio State before. So, can Jeremiah McLaughlin do that? I mean, haven't seen it, but maybe he's got that in him. Dude looks really, really good. So, last week's trivia has some conflicting answers depending on what source you look at. There have been a few teams to host game day 3 times. Ohio State 1996. Google's AI says Florida did it a couple times. There was not one right answer, so not the perfect trivia question. That's okay. That's okay. Just a reminder, when you send the trivia questions, make sure you have the answer. Don't send it to me before you've got the answer, because you got to be 100% certain about the answer as well. Once we get back to the off season one day, this will be a more regular thing on the show. It's very popular in the off season. I'm here for it. I love it. But during the season, it's just Tuesday trivia. So, I got a couple of good submissions. I want to shout out the question about kickers because Atticus Sappington got Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week honors, which he deserves. But this one takes it. And the question is in that iconic Oregon highlight in the early 2000s when Joey Harrington catches the pass, who threw him the ball? So I wasn't old enough to watch this live. I don't know that I've even gone back and watched the game highlights, but I've seen the highlight several times. I think I have a name. I think I have a name. Because it kind of gets muddled from an audio standpoint. The only time I've seen this play is on Matt Kearney's Coming Home music video. And it's the one that plays at Autzen Stadium. And Mike Tirico, who is a great play-by-play announcer, when Al Michaels moved on from Sunday Night Football, hiring Mike Tirico is what I call a great move. And frankly, with where Al is at, I love Al, read his book, great play-by-play announcer. He's been on the back nine for a while. Mike Tirico is spectacularly good. I'm like 99% sure he's the one calling the play. And when I think about this, I try to hear that in my head, but it's kind of convoluted with the actual song lyrics. And it's, he comes back to Harrington, who has it for the touchdown. It's someone can throw. Can throw. He comes back to Harrington, who has it for the touchdown. I think he's saying, it's so hard. Man, he comes, Howry? I don't even like fully remember, but this just is the name that's coming into my head. My official guess, Keenan Howry, was that his name? We're gonna find out. It was before my time. I was like 3 or 4, so I don't remember watching the game. But that's how we wrap today's show. I'm so excited to see that answer. Keenan Howry is my official guess. That might not even be a real person. It might be. It might be. That's just the name that just popped into my head for a little Tuesday trivia. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.